OldGuyTalks.com is all about being a better man. Join me on this kick-ass journey. Exclusive stuff for members only in the Old Guy Cave. Opt in now. This is Oris, the Old Guy from www.oldguytalks.com. Subscribe, rate, and review. And if you don't like me, well, review me too. Give me a bad review. A bad one. A really bad one. This is Oris, the Old Guy from www.oldguytalks.com coming at you tonight. But before I do that, remember, opt in. And when you do so, you're going to get my three ways to get laid more frequently without begging. That's right. All easy to do on a daily basis to improve the quality of that relationship with that special someone in your life, be it your wife, your girlfriend, your mistress, or whatever you want to call that person in your life. So tonight, I have the distinct pleasure of having here Branden Sherer of Distinctive Rockers. And Branden is a 35-year-old transplant from Chicago who now lives in the Pueblo City. Those of you who don't know what the Pueblo City is, that's called Tucson here in Arizona. Tucson, or Tucson, not so lovingly.
That's the one.
That's the one. So Branden's had a couple of business in the power wash detailer and things like that. And then all of a sudden he got into working with wood and making rockers in 2010. And as many of us remember 2010, that was not a particularly good year to be going into business, was it, Branden?
It was a bit of a rough time. Things were still a bit tough. And, you know, when you don't have some place to go home to, it's kind of tough when you're deciding where to go to work, that's for sure.
Yeah, living out of your car and making rockers in the trunk is kind of tough.
All the more impressive. Shop isn't quite that small, but
so now let me start off with my first question, which is no one ever says, when they're a kid, they don't wake up in the morning and say, "Wow, I want to make rockers out of wood. That's the best job in the world, making rockers out of the world." They want to be a fireman, they want to be a doctor, a policeman. Maybe own a strip bar, something like that. Something like that. Some guy stuff. So
right, one of the finer things, sure.
Yeah. So
to be honest, Orth, I tripped and fell into it. As you said, you mentioned, I ran a small pressure washing and detail service here in town. I kind of always did my own thing as far as that goes, and it just happened to be at a time when I injured a knee and was sending my clients elsewhere that I came across a gentleman using this process in these woods and building these chairs for the very first time. So to be perfectly honest, I tripped and fell into it. Lucky coincidence. I didn't have a real background in woods. I spent all my summers up in the north woods of Wisconsin my whole life, and I had no idea that some of these woods were so vibrant just beneath the surface. I had no exposure to the exotics, so I was instantly enamored when I came across this gentleman doing his thing.
Okay, and now he just made rocking chairs exclusively, or did he do other things in different kind of woods?
No, this is a really interesting guy. Actually, my stepfather. He's a dentist and engineer, originally from the Midwest as well, out of Iowa. In his spare time, he's always been a bit of a craftsman. So he built these rocking chairs. He built a harpsichord, which has to be, exacting to the millimeter.
Wow.
He built his graduating college. And again, we took this weekend and we were there till all hours of the morning, 3 and 4 o'clock, and talking about his process. And for me, that was really it. From there, it was really the next week that I jumped into it full time.
Okay. Out of all the mediums to do art, what is it about the wood that drew you and continues to draw you to create these art pieces? Because that's not what they are. They're art pieces. They're not furniture. They're art pieces. So what drew you to instead of like marble or paint or all the other things that are available out there? What's so special about wood to you?
Absolutely. Well, and that's generally what we think of when we think of art. We think of a statue carved in marble. We think of a beautiful painting or the like. And again, I had never been exposed to wood used in such a way. I'd been in wood cabins. And again, I've always loved it as a handsome and warm building material. But these exotic woods, they're There's an instant attraction, and it's very tactile experience, I'd like to say. You know, when you're in the presence of one of these woods, you can touch and feel, and they just feel so warm and alive. And again, before you even get to touch them, they've already got so much going on there, character-wise, that I feel like a lot of other artists. Obviously, you've got to start with a blank canvas. You've got to start with the solid block of marble to carve your statue there. Whereas these woods, I feel like you can almost buy a piece and hang it on the wall as is, because it would take a real artist to try and simulate what you've got going on there naturally before a craftsman like me even touches the stuff. So again, for me at least, it was an instant attraction. And for most of the people I've encountered along my way trying to market these products and share my enthusiasm for these woods, it's instant for a lot of people because we just aren't exposed to these really fantastic exotic woods on a daily basis. So for a lot of people, it's a new exposure. And then for the people who've been exposed, they already know why they love this stuff. So for me, a part of it is getting to share this stuff with people for whom, like me, it's a new experience, and they're a real pleasure to work with. And I almost, we could go on almost all day just about the woods themselves.
Well, I do want to get into a little bit more about the woods themselves. I mean,
absolutely.
You meant there's as on your website, you listed, say there's over 100,000 species of different kinds of woods.
Yes, sir.
And so how many of these you actually look at, and what makes you pick certain types of woods to do your art?
That's an aesthetic thing. As you say, if there's somewhere around 100,000 species of trees, even if all of them were, would be good for a woodworking project, I could work with a different wood every week and I'd never get to them all. So some of it is availability. As far as the pieces of wood that I choose, first I go for density is a lot of it. A lot of these exotic woods are a lot more dense than the normal woods we're exposed to at, say, Home Depot or somewhere, pine or redwood. Very soft woods can't hold the kind of detail that I look to put into my projects. So these woods, first of all, can hold finer detail with carving and with joinery, stuff like that. And then you go to, again, the extreme character of these. For instance, Brazilian rosewood is one that's highly prized as the world's, most expensive, the world's most warm, the world's most interesting wood. And, from 59 Les Paul guitars to basically everything you'd think of as a really classic artistic wood piece would have been done in something like that. And these days they realize what they have, and now it's a national treasure. You can't even import the stuff from Brazil anymore. So availability, again, come back to it's hard to even find the right stuff. Yeah.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions. I mean, how hard is it to get some of these woods? I imagine you said that some of them are very difficult and probably illegal. Some of them are illegal to export or import even.
And they bring you back to the Brazilian rosewood. A number of others since 1992, when that one was put on the list. Obviously, people have seen, well, we're not going to have any trees left for a forest, much less for the stuff people want to do it with. So again, it became something that country by country, tree by tree, as you say, people realized what they have. And rarity-wise, legality-wise, you actually have to have proper paperwork to bring Brazilian rosewood into the country and show that the tree itself was either felled naturally or felled before the ban in 1992. And that's the case with a lot of these newer woods. Not newer woods, but newer regulations as far as getting them. There was a wood I went to get last year called ancient Corey wood. Now, this was a redwood-sized tree that grew in New Zealand specifically over 50,000 years ago. And these trees felled, and the environment in which they fell made it so that instead of calcifying, it became still workable. So, excuse me, I get all excited just talking about these woods.
I could tell.
I don't know where to start with this stuff.
You're into it, man. Go for it. Keep on.
The ancient Corey wood, I actually had to drive to upstate Wisconsin to get my hands on some of it. It's the only place in the U.S. that actually brought some in, 4 hours north of even Green Bay on these little county roads. And the stuff, they had to use ground-penetrating radar in New Zealand to find this stuff. I'm talking like looking for dinosaur bones, So even the woods we look for that might not have the most extreme character, are certainly going to have a very interesting story. And I try and stick to materials that all have that sort of story or character going on, because again, there's so much out there that you can find with your typical materials, typical building techniques, that I wanted to kind of step outside the norm and use only those materials that people might not have ever seen or even heard of. So that's really what got me to working with the exotics, exclusively, at least for those first couple of years, because they're just, you see them, and whatever project you were going to do it takes it to a whole new level, and people really appreciate that, I think.
Sure. Well, I can imagine that, getting them and sourcing that stuff is very challenging, and keeping that line open for yourself is from a logistics business standpoint is a challenge.
Well, especially in a smaller town like Tucson, I mean, a lot of places simply don't have the resources to use floor space for these woods. So while a lot of even places that specialize in exotic woods might like to have, a huge variety and hundreds of woods to show their craftsmen, it just doesn't make sense, because some of these things are, $100 a board foot, which you're talking about a piece of wood the size of a hardback book is $100. And when you need 100 board feet for even a small chair, you're talking, so from here in Tucson, I typically drive over to one of the big ports, San Diego, Carlsbad there. There's a couple really great places. But that's a key part of the process, is I have to see this wood before I start a project. I have to know that this piece is going to be my rocker piece. This piece is going to be my front leg. I have to see them in person, unless you've developed a really good relationship with the, with the wood place, and they know what you're looking for, which typically takes years, because again, I need to know that this piece is going to work for what I'm doing, and that simply doesn't work by ordering it online or the like. So hand choosing these woods is a very big part of the process, and having the chairs come out how I plan them ahead of time.
Okay.
Getting the grain to match up the symmetry.
Yeah. So I assume you always make one chair out of one particular type of wood. Is that correct? Or do you ever mix them, or just generally one chair, one wood?
Not at all. I like to, that's part of the reason I like presenting my chairs in the way I do, because, it gives people inspiration for what they'd like to see with their chair. Wow, I really love that chair, but is there a wood that comes in a purplish? Or wow, I really like that, but could you do it in another way? In fact, I have one chair that I like to bring to the shows, and I like to keep up on the website, because it's one of my basic rockers, but each of the 9 different pieces is a different exotic hardwood. I call it the jigsaw rocker, and that particular chair, again, each particular piece is an entirely different wood. Now, that obviously presents some challenges when you're doing joinery and stuff like that, but it's my aim to use as many of these exotics as I possibly can, and obviously the ones that the customer would like best, what would work best for the room they're decorating, or the family heirloom, or some of these end up in waiting rooms at law firms. It really depends on what the customer is looking for, and because there's so many species of woods, colors, characters, it's almost endless what we can do for them when we get together in the creative process.
Sure. You use a term I'm not completely familiar with. I kind of get an idea, but can you tell me, what's a joinery?
Joinery is the technique used to as it says, to join 2 pieces of wood together. Now, there are obviously many ways to do this, from the very simple, like you'd think, just nailing 2 pieces of wood together, to creating dovetails and mortise and tenon joints. And these are what you think of more like Legos, where these things don't take any special extra pieces or glue, but fit together just perfectly. And the traditional building techniques like that are one of the things, again, that I became completely enamored with when I met Stephen.
Yeah. So these are all friction fit. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so they're all friction fit.
I typically do a glue up as well, just because these pieces, you never know where they're going to go. They might, in any piece of furniture's life, you might move from one city to another a half dozen times and bring the same thing around. So I like to, some of these chairs might be around for just years, and some of them will be around for generations. So I do what I can to make sure that's going to happen.
Just an aside, it just made me think. Many years ago, we had a custom table made, a dining room table, and we actually, fortunately, the builder is much younger than I am and my wife are, and so I know they'll be around for quite a while because we have to hire them to come and take it apart and put it back together wherever we
That
move.
is an issue. Absolutely, absolutely.
It seats like 14, but it's kind of funny. So
it's nice when something is built custom for the homestead, but then when it comes to moving something that was built specifically for that space, it's a whole separate issue. Absolutely.
Yeah, and anytime we move, the place that we move to has to be able to accommodate this table, which is like wipes out about 2/3 of the places that we would normally.
How's the light? How's the kitchen? And will the table fit? Right.
Will the table fit? And it's okay if the table fits in the living room. That too. We've had a few of those situations. So we talked a little bit about getting the wood and sourcing it. When you get it into your shop, tell us about what the first steps are, what the process is of how you handle the wood and what it goes through when you're preparing it to make it into a rocking chair.
Sure. Well, I do as much as I can at the beginning, obviously in the selection process, to make sure that I'm not going to be spending countless hours getting the wood to where I need to be to make those first cuts. In other words, I want to make sure my wood is nice and straight. There's no warps or bends, anything like that. So that then when I get it to the shop, I can sit down with my pattern and do exactly what we were talking about. Decide which piece is going to go where, what's going to be my first cut, which obviously at this point is generally there's a process as far as that goes. But my very first step is spending at least a day or two with that wood. I mean, it may sound like a waste of time, but I spend a lot of time with that wood before I make the first cut.
Okay, Branden, I'm getting a picture of you sitting there hugging the wood. Is that
little rocking back and forth? Maybe.
Yeah, you being one with the wood.
One with the wood, exactly. Very Zen process indeed. I'll tell you, are you a skier, snowboarder, Orth?
I'm a skier.
Okay, maybe a boat guy too.
Actually, never been really a boat guy. I mean, I've done some sailing here and there a long time ago, but not recently.
Okay. Now, do you ever notice that after a long day or weekend of skiing or hopping off the boat, even if it's just, beers and buddies on the water there, end of the day, you're getting in bed and you can still kind of feel a little wavy or your legs are still skiing a little bit on you? The more time I spend with my woods, I get that same phenomenon going on where I'm kind of cruising along with the flow of this wood. I mean, it's literally that immersive a process where it's not just the pieces, but the wood itself kind of calls me in where I'm, I'm still with the wood even when I'm in bed. That same kind of deal going on.
I mean, your enthusiasm is infectious for it. I mean, it's obviously you just love what you're doing day in and day out.
There's a lot of satisfaction, I think, comes from taking, as you say, what is a pile of wood and turning it into something not just useful, but I like to think beautiful. And some of these things, again, for me, it's a great process just building the stuff. But then I encounter customers and people in general who may not share the same enthusiasm, but they respond to the wood, they respond to the piece, they're asking questions, and these may be people who love wood and maybe people who don't, but from selecting the wood all the way to showing the pieces has been such an enjoyable process, sharing these things, that it really hasn't faded, the excitement for each new project.
So I want to get back a little bit to the wood preparation and the actual first steps. When you talked about cutting the wood and all that, how do you do that? What kind of machinery or hand tools or what kind of things do you use in this process?
Sure. To be honest, Steve's shop was very well equipped, however small it was. But to this day, my favorite and most useful tool in the shop is a Stanley Sweetheart chisel from 1913.
Oh my God.
Yes. Anytime I see one of these things online, I buy another one because they simply don't make most tools like they used to. And this one in particular, it holds a beautiful edge. It's the tool I use to clean up basically every other cut I make on this thing, at least joinery wise. So while I do make some cuts with the table saw initially, I use the bandsaw as much as I can. The rest of it comes down to that Stanley Sweetheart chisel, pile of rasps, and a whole lot of sandpaper. Center of the bullseye for me, some of my colleagues, you could say, in the industry that I keep up with online from their daily and weekly posts on Instagram, Facebook, that kind of thing, have shops that I am incredibly jealous of. every tool for every job you can think of, every power tool with a jig for sanding this piece just right. I mean, they can literally fly through a process that takes me dozens and dozens of extra hours because I'm doing it all by hand. And again, I enjoy the process, but I certainly wouldn't mind at some point having a a proper, or at least a slightly better equipped workshop, I should say.
Okay, and then after you get done with the shaping of the wood, what are the next steps?
The shaping of the individual pieces, I guess you would say. If we're still talking about rocker, that's certainly what I do first. Is I glue up, say, the billets for the seat. I get all my pieces cut out where they need to be, and then you go ahead and start on the joints. And obviously, all of this is, any of these cuts take into account the next cuts down the line. In other words, obviously, you have to plan ahead for the next steps, as I'm sure is true in anything. But yeah, there's a very specific order that you want to go through to make sure that all your joints are going to line up just right as you add one piece, the next piece, the next piece. The two legs have to be just right for the top of the back, obviously, to meet up just right. So while it seems a fairly simple process in the middle of it, I guess it's somewhat complicated in that you just have to spend a lot of time measuring, cutting, or not cutting, but measuring, marking, and then measuring one more time, really. So that process to take it from straight lumber all the way to these curved pieces, and by the way, those curved pieces, it's what he called glue day or assembly day, is the day I came across this first chair, where these beautiful Brazilian tulip wood, which is vibrant pinks and yellows and a little bit of white sapwood thrown in there, were in these beautifully curvaceous, such beautiful pieces that go together into a chair. And again, there's a disconnect between how did you get from this pile of wood to these incredible pieces that fit together like they grew out of the ground together, So the cuts themselves are almost not the most important part of the process. Obviously I have to get them where they need to be going, but that's just the beginning of the process, is getting the chair together, because then the rest of it is shaping and sanding it down to a final project, which really is as involved as any of the rest of it.
Okay. And is there a finish that's put on it, or what's that?
There is. I typically use lacquer finishes. Now, here's the thing: is people say, "What stain is that? What color is that? How did you make that wood look like that?" Well, that's the whole point of working with these exotics. I don't use stains. I don't use colors. That's how this wood looks once you get under the surface. Now, I do like to put the lacquer. What that does is it kind of gives it a little shine. Whenever you get a little wetness or a little bit of lacquer on there, it really brings out the character of that wood. Sometimes I like to use an oil finish, because sometimes that shininess, while it really brings out the character of the wood, it will also kind of remove you from the surface of it a little, excuse me, where it looks amazing, but then you get to touch it and you're kind of touching the lacquer surface instead of that porous wood surface that so sometimes with that oil finish, it'll give you that same kind of wet, really nice look, but then you still have the really tactile experience of the wood as well. So it really depends on the project, and again, what a potential customer is looking for in the final.
Okay. On your website, you said that the lines of the wood blend into the chair. What is that? What does that mean?
Well, when I'm talking about the lines of the wood, I'm talking about the character inherent in the wood itself. For those who don't know, technical terms of the wood, it is the lines or the character you'll see in any kind of piece of wood. And that's what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, as far as, very carefully planning out which piece will go where, because the chair I started this whole career on, has its very beautiful shape, very original pattern, and the lines are just very beautiful. So I do what I can to make sure that whatever piece I've used, whether it's for the rocker piece or the seat, I want those lines to flow with the curve of the chair. Now, obviously, some of the chairs are meant for everyday sitting, and there's going to be upholstery involved as well, or there's going to be inlays and stuff like that kind of take you away from just the plain wood. But when I'm talking about building a project where it's just for the wood, then that's certainly one of the most important parts, is making the cuts and and making the joints so that there's no disconnect in between. You can have a really beautiful chair and a really beautiful piece of it, but then it's sort of like a trip when you're trying to, when the transition between, say, the seat and the leg is a completely different pattern in the wood. It would still be a beautiful piece. People would still love the wood, but I like to take that extra step to make sure there's an extra level of symmetry there. So that's really all that's about.
Okay. Now, you make 3 kinds of rockers. Can you tell us
Yes.
a little bit about what the 3 different kinds are?
Sure. Well, one's the slipper rocker. That's the one we've been talking about. I like to call her the pretty girl. She kind of sits in the corner and just looks real good, and that one's more about, as you say, being an artistic piece where that'll end up, it's not an everyday sitting chair. It's more made to look and enjoy and maybe display the family name or the corporate logo or that kind of thing. So that chair is generally for people who are looking to buy a more artistic piece to appreciate the wood itself. I have another called the Elcon rocker, which has almost 3 times as many joints. So it's incredibly labor intensive, but it's another all wood rocker. However, this one is modeled more on, not modeled on, but it's more like the Maloof rocker in that it has arms and it could be an everyday sitting chair and yet still be all wood. And the third chair we call the friendship rocker, which is still an all wooden frame, but then obviously it's an upholstered and padded chair as well for people who actually do want an everyday sitting experience, whether it's a maternity chair or just a chair for the house. So you typically see people going one end to the other. I really don't do a lot of Elcon rockers. I'll do either the slipper rocker, again, with a company logo for a waiting room or something like that, or I'll do the friendship rocker for someone who's going to sit in this thing and use it every day. And the friendship rocker, actually, I also modified into an office chair because I found a lot of people that were very fond of the wood and very fond of the pattern and the whole idea, but the very idea that I, as a man, would own a rocking chair at my age, no, I won't have it. Some people seem opposed to the very idea of owning a rocker. So I went ahead and developed that one into an office chair so they could, still enjoy the feel of it without the whole rocker deal.
Now, does it have wheels on it, or is it an office chair?
I've done several models, yes. Typically, I'll put wheels on it because that's what you'll generally see. It's what people are typically used to. But I'll also do a ball and claw foot one as well. Obviously, same thing, a little more labor intensive. But I basically go out there and buy the best hardware on the market for the actual, up, down, the kind of movements that you want the chair to have. And then I create an actual 5-footed, base that you might see on a typical office chair out of the same woods that I typically use. So it's just one more kind of neat little aesthetic for an office chair that's not just kind of sitting there.
Okay. Now, you've done some different themes. What are some of the more unusual themes that you've done for the chairs?
Unusual. Well, to be honest, that very first week, that's one of the things that got me into this to begin with, is I saw these beautiful old techniques and this old kind of simple rocking chairs. Wow. And I thought, why not marry it with some of this, not only new techniques, but some of the new stuff that's being done. I think there was a History Channel show back in the day where they built motorcycles, custom ones for a particular business, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Where right from the beginning, I thought, well, okay, I love these rockers, but it's already sort of a niche market for, so why don't we make them a little more appealing and be able to customize them however anyone wants. So that's kind of how that whole thing started. The very first one I tried was a fleur-de-lis rocker because it's sort of a, it's just such a well-known symbol. It comes in various forms and widely recognized. That one was a lot of fun. As far as strange, there was one rocker that actually ended up being plated in more than 4 ounces of 24-karat gold.
So is that the famous one, the 35?
Yes, that one indeed. However, price-wise, again, with these Brazilians and tulip woods, you can talk 10 grand on a pile of this wood before I've even touched it. So if you want to turn it into something custom after that, you can get up towards 35 real easy.
Real easy, with the gold too. But that's quite a chair. Obviously, that's not an everyday chair.
It's not, and in fact, the base of it, that was a whole separate process because you simply can't put gold on wood, so we had to make a lost wax cast of the thing and have it done in silica bronze and then have the pieces put together and electroplated, and it was a whole thing. But we still do some interesting things that are a little closer to reality. One of my favorite ones is the auto rockers. I take one of the friendship frames, either in the rocking chair frame or the office chair version, and I take it up to an exotic auto upholsterer like Ferrari of Scottsdale, someone like that. I have them take their Ferrari tan or whatever, materials they'd use right there in the car, the Alcantara suedes, and I have them use auto foam to shape the seat exactly as it would be in your exotic car. So for people who are collectors of Porsches and Lamborghinis and Ferraris, they were really into having this office chair that had the same leather, had the same shape, the same, even the grill piece from an F355 Spider on my first one, so it's a lot of fun doing stuff like that for enthusiasts of really anything, but the car one so far I've had the most fun with, because I've always been a car lover, and to be able to put something like that together with the real materials, it really was a lot of fun. So I always look forward to anything automotive themed.
Yeah. Now I think the Ferrari chairs are on your website, and actually there's a Maserati chair and some others that are on your website, and those are really, I mean, they're very pretty, but and at the same time they look like they're fun to have. Yeah,
exactly. Especially for people who are always looking for that one extra thing. Oh, my buddy doesn't have this for the man cave. Or, I met a gentleman at the show just last week who bought his wife a new Jaguar last year for their anniversary. Very nice, but what do you do to top it? It's not about topping things. It's about, finding a unique gift sometimes. So that's what I've liked to offer for people who are looking for something a little unusual, is something that will be along the lines, right in line with something they love. It'll be traditional and, excuse me, not finding the word for it. But anyway, yeah, it's just something that's been an awful lot of fun.
Okay. And then you have another little thing that you do that we talked about a little bit off camera, the business cards.
Yes, the business cards. Well, that's one of those things. I think it's another reason that I decided to do this whole thing in the first place, is there was a bit of a hole in the market when it comes to using these exotic woods, as we said, because they're very expensive. When it comes to building furniture, rocking chairs especially, there is a great deal of waste involved. I'm talking 60 to 70%. So if I just spent thousands of dollars on a pile of wood and 60 to 70% of it is now basically real pretty firewood, what do you do with the rest of that stuff? For the first couple of years, I toyed with the idea of, making small turn bowls and pen blanks and knife handles and all that kind of stuff that the market is really saturated with. Then I went down to my first class at one of these woodworking places, and this gentleman had the same idea as I had, using these small pieces, created a 4.5-foot turned vase with over 3,500 individual pieces in it as his first project. So it just didn't seem like this was something, it might be fun to use these scraps, in that kind of way. But as far as using them in my business and actually selling these pieces, I'm just it'd be such a drop in the bucket. So what I did was go ahead and cut them as close as I could to actual business card size and mill them down and find a process for getting my information on there. And so now I've got hardwood business cards that are made out of the leftovers from customer chairs.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Hey, Branden, we got a couple questions here from some of our viewers. Kiana Kelly, which rocker is recommended for new mothers?
New mothers, that would have to be the Friendship rocker. And in fact, I actually push maternity projects to the front of the calendar, because you don't want your kid to be 2 years old. Oh, there you go. Yeah, you're up front, Missy. It would be the everyday sitting chair, and that's the upholstered one. And that one's a lot of fun because you get to pick your wood. You get to pick any potential themes or family names or anything like that you get to want to put in there. And then you get to choose an upholstery as well. So that one's kind of fun in that there's so many more options for kind of customizing it and making it your own.
Okay. Now, this is another question here. Do you ever modify them for a person's posture?
I've only had 2 requests for this, actually, and midway through the process of trying to figure out the best way to do this, to actually, not just take the fella's measurements, but actually create a chair that would be beneficial and helpful to him posture-wise and support-wise, he ended up trying out the model of my very first Ferrari chair and labeled it the most comfortable furniture he had ever set foot in. He basically fell in head over heels in love with this thing. Never mind all that project. Never mind all these details. I'll take that one right there. And so that was the closest I ever got to actually customizing one. Though at the show, I do get about every single time the slipper rocker has a very nice carved out seat, real kind of neat shape to it instead of just being flat. And just about every time I get someone that asks me if I can go ahead and create, or jokingly at least, if I can go ahead and create a mold for their butt to fit in the chair just right. Otherwise, it's not so much a posture thing.
Kiana is asking for a gift idea. And she was laughing. Thanks. So, thank you, Kiana. Well, so if somebody wants to get a hold of you, Branden, where do they get a hold of you?
Best place is,
your website?
Check out my website, and it'll have my, information, phone number, emails, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Otherwise, you see me out and about at home shows, the big shows up in Scottsdale and Auto Week.
Tell everybody your website.
DistinctiveRockers.com.
Okay. And Melanie, do you have any business? She wants to see the business cards. Can you show them the business cards?
Yeah. Well, and again, they kind of all end up looking, let's see. They all end up looking a little different because the
that's pretty cool. Hold that up for a little bit. That's really cool. And that's made out of wood.
This one is, yes, this one is Gonçalves Alves. This one right here is Bacote. But again, I end up with scraps of all different nature, all different kinds. I end up with cocobolos and king woods. I have a couple left from the Brazilian tulip woods. And I basically use whichever pieces are going to go ahead and be big enough to actually cut these cards. Not exactly the most practical for sticking in your wallet there, I suppose, but it certainly seems to keep me on people's minds when they see it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that whoever orders those cards from you, they're careful about who they give them out to. Too.
Absolutely, that was a concern of mine at first. I was giving out hundreds of these cards that really were very expensive to produce and very time-consuming. And all of a sudden, I realized that I was giving out a lot more cards than, callbacks I was getting. So it's definitely something you got to regulate when your business cards are, on the order of $10 to $20 a piece.
Okay, yeah, no, wow, yeah. I imagine that Lisa said that's probably not something that you do on a daily basis. So, Branden, anything else that you think that we haven't talked about that we should know about your business and how you do stuff?
Again, with the woods, we can always talk about how I do things. That the techniques are traditional, and for a very important reason. Typically, when you'll see rocking chairs on the market, they'll all be copies of the same chair over and over and over again. In fact, just this week up at Barrett-Jackson there. Have you been up there this year?
I haven't been up there this year, no.
Okay. It's, it's kind of fun for going out there and checking out. As a vendor, it's a bit of a mess these days.
By the way, Melanie says thank you for showing the business cards. Thank you, Melanie.
Oh, absolutely. Welcome. Yeah, I ran into a gentleman who's making Sam Maloof rocking chairs for $15,000 and a music stand for $5,000. Now, Sam Maloof was the American hardwood builder. They called him, Time magazine called him the Hemingway of hardwood. He's self-taught, lived in California there, and nowadays you'll find his pieces in the Boston Museum of Art, the Smithsonian, the LA Museum of Art. I mean, he really was that guy. And now when you find these high-end rocking chairs on the market, time and time again, they're copies of his chairs. Mm-hmm. Again and again and again. And that's one of the reasons I started doing this full-time is that, okay, they're very beautiful, but you're just buying a print of the Mona Lisa. You're just buying a knockoff of a master's chair. And again, don't get me wrong, there's a reason it's copied again and again and again. It's a gorgeous piece of furniture. But that's one of the things that inspired me to start doing this is that as much talent as there is, out there building these chairs, they're not really doing anything original. And as a matter of fact, they're building the chairs the same way Sam did, which uses screws and the like to hold the joints together. Now, Sam came back from the Army and was building furniture for him and his wife for his house as a practical matter. He wasn't doing this for a business. When he started building furniture, he's self-taught and he was building the stuff for himself. Now, he didn't have enough money or enough clamps to do a whole project. So he would clamp one piece of the chair, run a screw in, and move on to the next. Perfectly fine. Again, these chairs turned out to be incredible, but nowadays you've got artists who are way more well-equipped, who have a background in woodworking, and they build it the same way. They're still using screws to hold the joints together. They're still doing things that Sam did out of necessity, and here they are charging 10 and 15 and 20 grand for chairs that they really haven't taken those extra steps that Steve taught me how to incorporate into our stuff, where, again, you're not going to find hardware holding the joints together. It's going to be blind dovetails and mortise and tenon and all the traditional techniques that you're kind of losing in an era of Amazon point and click. So that was one of the more important things, I thought, was marking a distinction between a lot of the chairs you see out there and the originality of some of the other craftsmen that are out there, because they are out there. I'm absolute awe of some of my peers out there and the work they're doing.
Being a artist in wood, what wood? And I'm not going to limit this to chairs. What kind of wood do you? What piece of art that is made out of wood do you find to be the most interesting and the most beautiful that you say, wow, that is incredible? I mean, because I'm sure you've looked at other things.
Absolutely. And to be perfectly honest, I'm sure I've seen some in my life where I might not have appreciated what went into creating them before this last decade or so, when, once I learned the trade and learned the craft, once you kind of understand what goes into creating a piece, you might have a greater appreciation for some of them. And some that I actually saw last time I was on the East Coast, and some of the pieces in the Smithsonian, a lot of them are turned pieces, which means they were put on a lathe and turned into a bowl or a vase or something similar. And you'll see people turning a root burl piece of wood into a bowl that's so paper thin that it literally has light coming through it. Or again, a turned segmented bowl or vase 5 feet high with 10,000 pieces in it. Or, it really isn't any one specific thing, because there's so many different products where I can appreciate the labor and love that went into building it in a certain way that might not have been necessary to get the project done, but they wanted to do it in such a way that it made it that much more special, either technique-wise or material-wise, that kind of thing. So I guess some of my favorites would have to be, I was trying to actually go and see some of Sam Malief's pieces in person, and while I was there, some of these turned pieces and some of the other stuff they've got in display are just mind-boggling. Otherwise, I would say, it's some of the historic pieces that you find. That's another aspect of the whole thing that enamored me to wood, is that the longevity of it, the permanence of it. A lot of the pieces that we have, a lot of the antiques, a lot of the things that we have that have, special value to us and our families is going to be, grandma's old hutch or that old Louis Quinze chair. Or a lot of paintings don't make it through. So a lot of the stuff we see that has some age to it and a story to tell attached to it, is a piece of furniture that's been around for a couple generations or even a couple hundred years.
Oh, great. Yeah, I mean, the one that comes to mind for me is there's a staircase in a chapel in Santa Fe that's built all out of wood with, and it's a spiral staircase, and it's a spectacular one. I believe it actually has no. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's entirely possible that was Sam's staircase, because among his portfolio, one of his passion projects over the years was, in fact, an all wooden circular spiral staircase, and it's featured prominently in a lot of the literature about him, the biographies and that kind of stuff. But who would think to put the time in to build an all wood, completely intricate, beautiful spiral wooden staircase? It's like you said, you see something like that, and just the just the unlikeliness of it is almost, kind of stunning. And then you get into the details of how it was built and the handsomeness of the wood. And here, as you say, is a spiral staircase that after all these years sticks in your head because, wow, it was a beautiful thing. And that's not typically what one would think of was, oh, I went to a museum today. I saw a beautiful piece. Oh, yeah, well, I was at a mission and saw a spiral staircase. It's just one of those things where you have to see it in person to really appreciate.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting structure like that. There's a church actually built in Glen Spey, New York. It's a Ukrainian Catholic church, but it's all made out of wood, and no nails have been used to it. It's all just joints and wood joints, and no nails were used to put it all together. So
and typically the only place you'll find that is an old barn with the old, you just don't find that in anything that's more intricately put together like an entire building. That's just, I saw the same thing at a mission in Carmel there, where obviously the whole building wasn't wood, but some of the pieces in there that had some age to it were although simple, very, very beautiful.
Okay. All right. Well, Branden, I want to thank you, but before we're done, the old guy is about virtues, which we've been talking about, and about vices. So the old guy always wants to find out about his guest's vices. So I got a couple of things I want to finish up with. So when you're working on the wood or just in general, what kind of music do you listen to?
That's a little bit of everything. As long as it's got an actual melody to it, or if I'm not a big, heavy metal head banging guitar smashing guy, to me that stuff is just not music. So my playlists are actually a little bit strange to most people, I think I'd say, because you might have a little bit of Frank Sinatra, followed immediately by some Snoop Dogg, followed immediately by some Aretha Franklin, followed immediately by some so it's really kind of depends on the mood and the project of what you're doing, but my playlists tend to be pretty mixed up.
All right. So now if you are in the closet eating something bad, what would that bad thing be?
Ooh.
So Megan, you can listen to this.
What do I have to hide from the world? Or maybe more importantly, I simply don't want to share with anyone else. Ooh. My gosh. That's a rough one. To tell you the truth, when I don't have anything that I'd have to hoard like that. I'll tell you what, maybe the last glass of scotch, something like that. Otherwise, it's more of a communal experience for me. I want everyone in on this.
All right. And do you smoke cigars?
I do. In fact, the last one I had, it's been a little more than a year now. I think it was just a really bad day when I was coming back from Auto Week in Monterey. I know, a bad day with cigars? How can that possibly be? Oh my gosh, Doris. I was coming back from Auto Week with a chair I had designed for Ellen DeGeneres, of all people, and smoking the last of my cigars on the way down the freeway. That's, 12, 13, 14 hours between Pebble Beach and LA. So I had some time and obviously some leftover cigars, had a great drive up the coast freeway there, and got to the freeway. And from there, it was just, not the freeway, excuse me, the studio in LA to drop off the chair. And it started a cascade of events that was almost completely detrimental to me in my workshop. So to be perfectly honest, I haven't even had a little guy since that road trip. But yes, I'm a cigar guy, and I typically enjoy them out there on the golf course or Pebble Beach, events like that. It's not an everyday thing for me. It's end of a big project or celebration type deal.
Yeah, the old guy has, I'll have 3 or 4 a week. Okay. My wife may say that's more than that, but
what's your label?
I like my favorite one is Gurkhas. I love Gurkhas. I think they're a great smoke. That's actually what I'm smoking right now. Okay. I got a 6 variety pack as a gift, and I really enjoy it. Alcohol? Do you like it? What kind do you like?
If we're talking a nice sipping drink, I want a nice single malt Scotch. If we're talking any other time, I don't drink much anymore. The crew I drank with socially have all kind of moved on and out and about. So it's a mixed drink made with espresso, of all things.
Oh, okay.
Something called a flatliner.
Oh, my God.
Well, I don't know. You'd think the espresso would do it. All right, so the story behind this one, it came from Palomino's in downtown Seattle. One of their regulars was a little overserved, but wanted one more drink before he hit the road. So they put together a coffee drink for him that, to be honest, I don't know how it made sense to give an overserved guy this. Shot of espresso, Bailey's, Kahlua, Godiva White, and a float of 151, shaken over ice till it's got a nice frothy head. Now, it's the tastiest coffee drink I've ever had, but for this particular gentleman, this particular day, I like to think it didn't work out so well.
So, and that was before Uber was around either, too.
That's right, it was.
Yeah,
this guy was on his own. Downtown Seattle, slippery streets. I hope the guy survived the day.
All right. And what would someone be surprised to find out about you?
That's a good one, Orth. Surprise. You mean besides the fact that I'm a 30-year-old who makes nothing but rocking chairs?
Yes, besides that.
Not a real crazy guy these days. I spend a lot of time with the Kindle. I've been to 49 states, every state but Delaware, and over 30 countries. Maybe I don't look that well traveled when you meet me, but I lucked out. My mother was a flight attendant, so it's kind of cheating.
That's great. That's great to have all those experiences.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. I miss my passes, I'll tell you what.
I bet. Well, Branden, I want to thank you for being on the show with Old Guy Talks. Again, one more time, tell everyone your website.
Yes, I'm at distinctiverockers.com. And if anybody has a better idea for a new name, I'm actually thinking of renaming the shop because, as we said, I need to move past rockers. That might be my specialty. It might be where I started. But with all the new products and artwork I've been putting out, I'm thinking of changing the name again to something more like Distinctive Creations, something like that. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, I started out as Exotic Rockers and was only there for a month or two because the only interest I was getting was for either people thinking I was some sort of AC/DC fan club or thinking that I sold some sort of exotic, let's see, how shall I say this politely, marital aids.
Yes.
So people thinking I make, sex swings and the like. So I had to switch from Exotic Rockers to Distinctive Rockers real quick.
Well, maybe you should make an erotic rocker.
Erotic rockers. Okay, viewers, I want to see the design for this one. Let's take it easy.
Yes. All right. Well, Branden, again, it has been a pleasure.
A lot of fun, Orth.
Learned so much about it. Learned some things I didn't expect to learn, which is the whole point of sitting down and talking with you.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate you coming on the show and spending some time with us and our viewers. So, folks, that's all we got for tonight. This is Orth, the Old Guy from www.oldguytalks.com signing off. Remember, if you have not already opted in, do so now. You're going to find out 3 ways how to improve the quality of your relationship with that special someone in your life. And it's all going to be very easy, very doable. And there will be dividends.
You did the trial and error for us on that one.
If you do those 3 things, guaranteed dividends. Take care. And remember, it's all about creating a kick-ass life.
Damn straight.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. And subscribe, rate, and review us, please. That's right. Subscribe, rate, and review us. If you like this, there's more of me at www.oldguytalks.com. Opt in there, and you'll get my 3 ways to get laid without begging. That's right, 3 ways to get laid more often without begging. Opt in and encourage other old guy assholes like you to opt in also.